Battleground, New York City, the fight for your vote. Your front row seat to the battle for New York's next mayor. It's the old guard clinging to power, chasing a candidate they never saw coming. Every night, our experts break it down.
What New Yorkers want above all else is authenticity.
We're listening to the people who matter most, you, the voters. And when the candidates sit across from us, nothing's off the table. What's your plan to make New York City feel like a safer city?
S.E. Cupp, that's your perception. Of course, there's a lot of crime.
So what's happening right now? Let's dive in. Welcome to Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote. It is Friday, September 12th, and we're just 53 days away from this all-important New York City mayoral race. Now, if you've been wondering why we're doing a nightly show on a little local election, it's because it simply isn't a little local election. This race for New York City mayor has captivated the country. It's being discussed all over New York State, in the halls of Congress in Washington, D.C., in the White House, all the way out to California and beyond, as Democrats try to figure out how to bring voters back to their party. Zohran Mamdani, the 33-year-old Democratic socialist, wasn't supposed to win the nomination. Andrew Cuomo, the famous or infamous, depending on how you look at it, former New York governor, or even Eric Adams, the incumbent mayor, they were supposed to be the Democratic nominees. But something about Mamdani captured voters' attention. From his social media prowess to his ground game, his authenticity to his issues-driven campaign, Mamdani managed to do something others haven't: get people excited about politics again. The national implications for this race just can't be overstated. If someone like Mamdani can win in New York City, Democrats believe they'll have permission to run more progressive candidates, more young candidates, more first-time candidates all over the country. Even President Trump and national Republicans are paying attention because in this race, they see an opportunity. They see an opportunity to make Mamdani the face of the Democratic Party. It's smart politics, but it cuts both ways. So that's why we're covering this election every night. It's not about one town. It's not about one guy. It's about nothing short of the future of the Democratic Party. And Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote, we've got it all covered here. Later in today's show, we're going to talk to a Democratic strategist about the importance of the AAPI vote in this upcoming election. But first, as always, let's get the freshest news off the campaign trail. Joining me now is Joe Anuta, a reporter covering City Hall for Politico. Welcome back, Joe.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. As we mentioned, President Trump is watching this race closely. He's reportedly even, getting involved, trying to have a hand in how it goes. He said this morning on Fox and Friends that Zohran Mamdani is going to win. He's blasted Mamdani, calling him my little communist. But ultimately, Joe, I think Trump wants Mamdani to win. What do you think?
Well, I think I agree that the Republicans see an opportunity here in this victory, to make Mamdani sort of a poster child, a foil, as really there's kind of this all-out brawl for control of Congress for the midterms.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think Trump wants him to win. I think
Okay.
I think Trump and Republicans like winning or seeing their enemies lose more than having a foil. I think if you just look at what he's done in the race so far, he and members of his administration were trying to get Eric Adams out of the race by dangling some job prospects. He had a conversation. He and Andrew Cuomo have both denied that this took place, but the New York Times reported that he had a conversation with Andrew Cuomo about the race. So for me, reading the tea leaves there, it seems like he's done more to try and boost Cuomo than, certainly do anything that would help Mamdani.
Which is so interesting because, I'll just remind people, there's a Republican in the race. There's an actual Republican in the race. We'll get to that in a second. But the thing with Republicans and Trump wanting Mamdani as a foil, I get that. It's smart politics. This is, been happening for a long time. But doesn't that come with risks? Because Mamdani's popular and Republicans painted Obama as a scary socialist too. He won. He ended up being a pretty popular president. If Mamdani isn't seen as the boogeyman, that Trump and Republicans are painting him as. Might end up being better for Democrats than he is for Republicans, no?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we've seen this movie before. In addition to former President Obama, AOC, the Squad, there are these elections around the country that I think Republicans try and make a national issue and try and yoke every Democrat to someone who's
Oh.
elected. I think there's just
Hmm.
limitations to that. Um, if you even look in New York, like the governor hasn't even endorsed Mamdani, neither has Chuck
Yeah.
Schumer, neither has Hakeem Jeffries. I think it's pretty easy for these Democrats to distance themselves and say, well, my policies are not his policies. So I think it has limited
Mhm.
utility.
Yeah.
I think it will continue to be a national story, and there'll be a lot of media attention on what he does as mayor, and there'll be a lot of criticism. But I'm not sure it's endangers, embattled Democrats or is that bad in these like competitive House districts.
So the New York Times is reporting that Mamdani is going to apologize for calling the NYPD cops racist in 2020. He also said then that cops were homophobic and a major threat to public safety. Those were some pretty controversial, strong remarks. Will voters believe that he no longer believes them or that he's just saying them to win a general election? What's your read?
I think it's tough to say. I mean, I think there's some subset of the population who will never forgive him for those comments. I think there's another, I don't think his voters really care that much. If you look at, he was saying that stuff during the primary and he won overwhelmingly. So I
Yeah.
think everyone kind of taps to the center in the general election, and it's pretty standard fare.
We'll see if it comes up in the debates,
Mhm,
because that's about a month away
mhm,
and about a month before the election. That'll be interesting if it's still
mhm,
sort of lingering around by then. Okay, stay right there, Joe, because I've got more questions for you.
mhm.
Battleground NYC will be right back. We're back with Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote. And let's get back to more news from the race. Back with me is Joe Anuta, a reporter
Mhm.
covering City Hall for Politico. Joe, we've been talking this week about the news that Eric Adams might have opened a door, might have cracked a door open to leaving this race.
Mhm.
There was a report from like a closed door meeting that he's talking about ordering an internal poll with which he will decide whether to stay in or not. What are you hearing about that though?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little vague. I think his spokesperson claimed that this poll was coming soon. There's really not a lot of like solid info out there about this. Today at a campaign stop, he sort of walked this whole notion back, um, that the poll would decide whether he's going to stay in the race or not. I think he said something more like it was just to test some messaging. So it's very unclear. There have been a lot of
Mm,
rumors, and we and others have reported about discussions between his team and the White House team. Um,
mhm.
there have been, potential job offers from the private sector. People are trying to woo
Yeah.
him out of the race,
Oh,
essentially.
yes.
Hmm.
Okay, so maybe he's closing that door again. We'll be tracking it and we'll be ready for a Friday afternoon news dump.
Yeah.
The worst thing to happen to news. But uh, another thing happened today. Former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg met with Zohran Mamdani, or I guess that was yesterday.
Mhm.
What do you know about that meeting?
I mean, from all accounts, it seems like it was very cordial. I think Bloomberg was seen as this technocratic mayor who hired competent people and he kind of let them do their thing with minimal interference from City Hall. And my sense is he was giving Mamdani some pointers on this, how to
Mm,
staff up and how to run City Hall. To me, it's more telling that. This meeting happened at all. Bloomberg put $8 million behind the effort to defeat Mondani during the
yes, he
primary.
did. Right.
And I think it's very indicative that there is a lot of the people who were very freaked out by his primary candidacy are now
Mhm.
resigned to him winning, I think. There's obviously
Yeah.
still some business folks out there who are plotting some sort of super PAC
Yeah.
attacks against him. But I think it's, I think there's also people like Bloomberg who I think, they see the
See
polling.
the writing on the wall. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they're like, well, I think
Yeah.
our efforts are better spent interfacing with him and maybe trying to impart some wisdom about how they think the city should be best run instead of trying to go against him.
Yeah. If Adams drops out, how quickly does this race change?
I honestly don't think it will have that big of an impact because he's polling so
Okay.
terribly. A lot of polls he's less than 10%. So I think, you know, you can't drop out. His name will be on the ballot. It's
Sure.
too late
Sure.
for anyone to get off. And so there'll be some subset of his voters that vote for him anyway, even if he suspends his campaign. And I think it's very hard to predict where those votes would even go. If his voters do abandon him, I don't see a
Mm.
scenario where they automatically go to Andrew Cuomo. So
But
I
we
don't.
have these
Mhm,
hypothetical matchups that
mhm.
show if Adams drops out, um, and it's head to head Cuomo to Mamdani, that Cuomo has a much better shot. Is that because Sliwa would have to drop out too?
Yes, Curtis
Uh-huh.
is a way bigger obstacle for Cuomo than Adams simply because he's polling better. I mean, he's getting
Better,
somewhere
yeah.
in the neighborhood of 15%. And Republicans
Mm.
typically get around 30% of the vote. So yeah, Slee was a much bigger problem for Cuomo than Adams, I would say.
It's so funny because Trump today, also in this Fox and Friends interview, said about Sliwa, I'm a Republican, but Curtis is not exactly prime time. He wants cats in Gracie Mansion. We don't need to have thousands of cats. Now, Joe, forgetting the cats.
It's
What does
tough,
it
but I'll
say that
try.
there's a Republican president is not backing a Republican in this race?
I think Trump can read a poll just like everyone else, and there's just
Yeah.
the path for Curtis is very, very narrow, and I think the politics of Andrew Cuomo is much closer, moderate Democrat to something that would be palatable at least for Trump compared to
Mm.
what Mamdani represents. So, and I don't think there's no
Mm.
love lost between these two either. I don't think they've really
No.
gotten along for a long time.
No. The personalities in this race are really fun to cover. Joe, thanks
Yes,
so much for being here. We'll have you back, okay?
of course. Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having me.
I know you're on call this weekend, so let us know if you hear anything
Yes, I
interesting.
will. Yes, I will.
All right. Up next, the nuanced AAPI vote in New York City, what that will mean for the candidates in November. Battleground NYC will be right back. We're back with Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote. And joining me now for the bigger picture and the importance of the AAPI vote is Trip Yang, a Democratic strategist and founder and CEO of Trip Yang Strategies. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a joy to be here.
Great. So the AAPI vote, or Asian American and Pacific Islander, it's a huge part of why Zoran Mamdani is ahead today. Talk about how he's been able to capture them and bring a lot of them out for the
Yeah.
first time.
Well, look, API, and here we often call it Asian Americans in New York State. We are 18% of New York City's population. We're the fastest growing demographic, both here in New York City as well as in the country. And so, of course, it is a tremendous part of the New York City electorate, both in the June primary, where Zoran Mamdani did pretty well with this demographic, as well as in this upcoming general election. Now, in the primary, Zoran Mamdani, who is of Indian descent and is also Muslim, he made naturally a lot of inroads. He's had relationships with a lot of South Asian Muslim American organizations that is part of the API. But surprisingly, to many observers, he also did really well with East Asian Americans, groups like Chinese Americans and Korean Americans. There were actually a number of precincts in Manhattan, Chinatown, in the Chinese American part of Sunset Park, in Flushing, Queens, where Zohar Mamdani won or did much better than folks expected. So he has a lot of momentum with Asian Americans as a whole, especially with South Asian Americans and Muslim Americans. I believe you'll see this translated to the general election.
I mean, that'll be the big question. And we'll see, if he's turned out everyone he can get or if there's more voters to get. Now, how does this group usually vote? I'm assuming like every other minority group, they're not a monolith. But how do they usually break in elections?
This is a really good question. And quite frankly, SC, I'm glad you asked this. API New Yorkers, we are often just not targeted and not communicated with in past mayoral elections and past presidential elections, despite our very large numbers. And so this is a really, really overdue question. Look,
Mhm.
Asian Americans generally care about many of the issues that other New Yorkers care about: affordability, housing, etc. But
Yep.
there's a couple of nuances. One, in a lot of the polling, it shows that both South Asian New Yorkers as well as East Asian New Yorkers, we often care about safety and combating anti-Asian hate crimes and bias
Yeah.
incidents more than the average New Yorker. The average New Yorker cares about safety a lot. So just imagine how
Right.
Asian Americans feel. And two, particularly with East Asian Americans, Chinese Americans, Korean Americans, at the SHSAT, specialized high schools, preserving, keeping the SHSAT has long been an animating issue. Now,
Mm.
in this election, the SHSAT has not been a big issue in the primary. In the general, you have seen Andrew Cuomo recently talking about keeping the test. What I would just say is this: Eric Adams, ironically, is probably the candidate with the longest history with Asian Americans, just because he has been in office a long time. Zohran's been in office for 4.5 years. When Eric Adams was borough president, he made a cultivated effort to try to woo Chinese Americans, especially, for a very, very long time. However, he is damaged goods, as we know, with every part of the electorate. And so Zohran Mamdani has a real opportunity here to expand his coalition, target a lot of these Asian Americans who are not necessarily registered Democrats. A lot of Asian Americans, especially Chinese Americans, are actually registered independents. Zohran Mamdani has a huge opportunity to continue his momentum and capture more parts of this electorate.
How did Eric Adams get the attention
Yeah.
and support of Asian Americans? That's interesting and could be a blueprint for someone else.
Well, I would say it helped him to some extent in 2021 when he ran for mayor the first time. Now, at that point, many Chinese Americans actually flocked to Andrew Yang, who is of Chinese and Taiwanese descent. But
Mhm.
in ranked choice voting, eventually a lot of Yang's Asian American voters went to Eric Adams in the June 2021 primary.
Hmm.
Now, what happened back then is that he really made a concerted effort during his 8 years as borough president to organize and hold a lot of cultural events. He held a lot of fundraisers with the Chinese American community. He also marched in a lot of parades. He was just a constant retail and relationship presence. And so that served him well back then. But again, in 2025, the best candidate for the AAPI electorate who's done the most genuine outreach has been Zohran Mamdani. Eric Adams, because his momentum has completely flatlined, Asian American groups don't have much enthusiasm for Eric Adams now.
What about Andrew Cuomo? He's a big name, long time figure in New York politics. Obviously, his dad was a governor. I know a lot of older voters. I know a lot of black voters. I know a lot of blue collar voters still really like Andrew Cuomo. What about Asian American voters?
The thing with Andrew Cuomo is that he had a huge missed opportunity in the primary. During the primary, he had some really strong endorsements from some Asian American elected officials. The problem is he just didn't put much effort himself into his primary campaign. In the general election, it might be a little too late. Look, he's been governor, of course. Asian Americans know him, but they don't have a deep relationship with him, even though he talks about safety, he talks about SHSAT. Sometimes having that effort really goes a long way. And right now, Zohran Mamdani has been showing more effort.
Okay, stay right there, Trip. I've got more questions for you about sort of more broadly the Democratic Party and Zohran Mamdani. Battleground NYC will be right back. We're back with Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote. One more time with Trip Yang, a Democratic strategist and founder and CEO of Trip Yang Strategies. Let's talk about Democrats more broadly, Trip. We talked to members of the NYC DSA yesterday who talked about Mamdani's ground game and how they have helped mobilize thousands of voters for him. Is that a warning sign to the Democratic Party that he's basically done this without them?
Well, look, Zohran Mamdani had so much momentum in the primary. What we actually forget is that many of his endorsements in the primary actually came in June, in that final month when he had already coalesced so much support. And so, look, Mamdani ran, quite frankly, the best political campaign in modern New York City history. I know many of your guests have talked about his hundreds of thousands of unique donors, his tens of thousands of unique volunteers. To me, this felt like Barack Obama running for president in Iowa or Bernie Sanders running for president for the first time. And that type of excitement, that energy,
Yeah.
especially from first-time and young voters. And by the way, he also surged with South Asian and Muslim American voters as well, whether it was Kensington, Brooklyn, or Parkchester or Bronx. Areas with large South Asian numbers had huge turnout all throughout the primary. And so, look, what the Democratic Party should learn is if you have an exciting young rising star, look at where he did really well. To me, he had his natural charisma, but also a relentless discipline on message, on affordability. Why not take that relentless discipline on message, as well as, to Mamdani's credit, he walks into every single room like he's speaking to a potential ally. That is just something that not every Democrat, not every progressive is good at. Take what he is good at, take what's transferable, and try to apply it to some of these races for Congress or U.S. Senate across the country. That's the lesson.
Yeah, I mean, authenticity is not transferable. We have seen that over and over and over again. You can't buy it, you can't train it, you can't teach it. I mean, that's lightning in a bottle, and he's got it. You know, I think there's part of the ground game lessons are really important, and listening to voters is really important. Staying on message is really important. Not telling voters that their lives are better than they are is really important. But that authenticity thing, you just can't buy. Listen, tell me if I'm wrong about this trip. The longer folks like Hakeem Jeffries and Kathy Hochul and Chuck Schumer, the longer they hold out on endorsing the Democratic frontrunner, it just looks worse for them and not Mamdani.
I have a nuanced perspective about this. I do think that every leader makes their decisions at the right moment for them. In Mamdani's case, a lot of members of the Democratic Party, maybe not those names you mentioned, but Congress members like Jerry Nadler, Adriano Espaillat, they endorsed him pretty quickly in the general election. I do believe in these next 7 weeks, Mamdani will collect more endorsements and support from Democratic Party leadership. Now, I will also say this. At this point, I actually don't even think it matters because Mamdani has already captivated so much of the Democratic Party. And by the way, he's actually leading in polls with independent voters. So at this point, look, it can be Mamdani against this current field. It can be Mamdani one-on-one against Andrew Cuomo. If Cuomo's top media surrogate, Donald Trump, gets his wish, it don't even matter. Mamdani is on the path to Gracie Mansion.
This feels like Andrew Cuomo's last stand. Do you think this is it for him?
I will say, for those of us who have worked in New York's politics for a long time, look, as a strategist, I've worked on over 50 campaigns in New York. I've worked in city government here. There are very, very few people in this town who like Andrew Cuomo, the person. Everything that you've heard about him in the public, all of his allegations, all of these accusations that he, quite frankly, led the state poorly during COVID, nursing home deaths, the sexual harassment allegations. Andrew Cuomo as a person is a completely not a pleasant individual. There's not a single person I know who would actually give sworn testimony that say they enjoy Andrew Cuomo as a person. So when you're in this situation, it is not surprising to me that almost every one of his endorsers from the primary has abandoned him. And look, quite frankly, I don't think that he has a real future in politics once he loses once again in November.
Wow. I don't think Andrew Cuomo's ever been told that he doesn't have a future in politics before. Like that's a lot.
Well,
that's
Andrew Cuomo also has been told no, but he doesn't really seem to acknowledge it.
Yeah, he doesn't know that word. You're right. So I've been covering politics a long time. You just said you've worked on a lot of campaigns. Whoever wins this race, and I'm not a New York City voter anymore. There's such a feeling of excitement around this. We have guests on who just talk about how excited they are to participate in this race. And it just makes me want to transport this all around the country because not everyone is feeling great about politics right now.
You have an amazing show. You have an amazing blueprint, an amazing team. I think that's a great idea. And look, I'll say this, here in New York, the mayor's race is our Super Bowl. Those of us who watch politics a long time, we care about this more than the presidential race. So it's an exciting time, and I wish you would take your show on the road across the country.
That's really sweet. And you should care about this more than the presidential. It's going to affect your life more than whoever's in the White House is. So, Trip, so great to have you here. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you all back here on Monday and every Monday through Friday for more in-depth conversation on Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote.